picture this. You're sitting on your couch, right?
Yeah, watching your favorite prestige crime drama.
Exactly. And you just find yourself actively yelling at the screen. Because, I mean, you're watching this impeccably dressed TV detective.
Always in a perfectly tailored suit.
Right. And they just casually stroll into a pristine crime scene.
Ducking right under the caution tape like it's nothing.
Yeah. And then they pick up a murder weapon by, like, sticking a pen through the trigger guard.
Which is just wild to actually think about.
Taking a sip of coffee and making some grand, sweeping assumption about the killer's psychological profile in, what, 30 seconds?
Yeah, it makes for fantastic television, but, it is a complete fabrication.
So our mission for today's deep dive is to tear down those flashy Hollywood myths. We're going to explore the rigorous, incredibly technical, and sometimes deeply unsettling reality of how a real crime scene is actually processed.
And to map this out, we're relying on insights from a veteran crime scene investigator we've been researching, someone with over 2 decades of experience in law enforcement. They detailed the meticulous, step-by-step reality of day one on a crime scene.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the foundational rule they established before a single boot even touches the ground isn't about physical evidence at all, right?
No, it's really about cognitive discipline. It's about starting with absolute, uncompromising zero assumptions.
Which, I mean, sounds noble in theory, but when you were standing on the periphery of a chaotic, blood-soaked room, human nature demands that you fill in the blanks.
Oh, for sure. You want to weave a narrative immediately.
But acting on that impulse destroys the integrity of the space. Think about the room you're sitting in right now as you listen to this. If a crime happened there, it's currently a perfectly clean slate.
Right. And the second anyone steps foot inside, they alter the environment. Forensic science operates on Locard's exchange principle, which essentially states that every contact leaves a trace.
So the metaphorical mud a careless detective tracks in time.
That's what investigators call artifact evidence. Before anyone even thinks about picking up a camera, the absolute priority is building an impenetrable fortress around the scene.
Because a responding officer wandering in doesn't just, leave a footprint.
Exactly. If they speak, they expel aerosolized saliva. If they brush against a door frame, they deposit epithelial skin cells.
And that touch DNA becomes an artifact.
Right. It's introduced after the fact, completely unrelated to the crime, but it can send a team of detectives chasing a phantom suspect for months.
That brings up a really fascinating point about the perimeter. It is not just yellow tape serving as a polite suggestion. It's a heavily monitored border with a strict entry log.
Oh, yeah. If you aren't on the log, you do not cross.
But the part of the source material that really shatters the illusion of the rogue detective is the waiting game. They lock down this perimeter, and then they just sit there.
They wait for a judge to sign a search warrant.
And as someone looking from the outside in, I have to push back on the logic there. Well, if you have a secured scene, but dark clouds are rolling in or, biological evidence is drawing out, isn't there a massive risk in having highly trained experts just standing on the sidewalk waiting for a piece of paper?
What's fascinating here is that, yes, it is an agonizing wait, but it's a necessary crucible. Time is absolutely the enemy of physical evidence, but an illegal search is the fatal enemy of justice.
Because of the Fourth Amendment.
Exactly. It protects against unreasonable searches. If an investigator rushes in without that warrant, under the legal doctrine of the fruit of the poisonous tree, every single piece of evidence collected,
No matter how damning it is.
right, no matter what it is, it can be thrown out in court.
Yeah.
They will deploy tents over outdoor evidence to protect against the rain, but they will not breach the threshold until the warrant is signed.
It really tests the ultimate discipline of the investigator.
It really does.
So once that judge's signature is on the warrant, the barrier is breached. The forensic services unit stepped in. But they still don't physically touch a single object.
No, their first job is to essentially freeze time.
And they start strictly on the exterior of the house, photographing every corner, every angle, before ever stepping through the front door. I think the source mentioned a modern digital crime scene file might contain upwards of 4,000 photographs.
The sheer volume is immense because you only get one chance to view a scene in its completely unaltered state, and photography is just the baseline nowadays.
Right, because today they deploy LiDAR, light detection and ranging, to map the geometry of the space.
Yeah.
I want to dig into that because LiDAR gets thrown around a lot in true crime circles, but how does it actually preserve the space?
So a LiDAR scanner sits on a tripod and spins. And as it spins, it's firing millions of microscopic laser pulses out into the room.
Okay.
It measures the exact nanosecond it takes for each laser pulse to bounce off a wall or a couch or a blood spatter and return to the sensor.
Wow.
By calculating that time of flight, the scanner creates a highly accurate three-dimensional point cloud. It captures the room down to the millimeter.
It's essentially making a digital clone of a house, so it can be walked through virtually for years to come.
Exactly. A minor detail in the background might not seem important on day one, but it could crack the case in year 3. A cold case detective can put on a VR headset and physically walk through the scene exactly as it existed that night.
That is basically digital immortality for a physical space.
It really is.
And while the lasers are mapping the visible geometry, the investigators are also looking for what the killer tried to erase.
Right, the invisible clues.
And anyone listening is probably very familiar with luminol, the chemical sprayed to detect blood. But I've always wondered about the chemical reality of that.
It's a tricky balance.
Because if you are trying to preserve microscopic DNA, doesn't aggressively spraying a chemical reagent all over a crime scene actively destroy the very biological evidence you were trying to save?
That is a brilliant question, and it is a massive point of anxiety for investigators.
I can imagine.
So, luminol works by reacting with the iron in hemoglobin, causing a chemiluminescent glow under a black light. A properly formulated luminol mixture won't destroy the underlying DNA profile. It doesn't break down the DNA chains.
Okay, that's good.
However, it does dilute the sample. But honestly, the real nightmare for investigators isn't destroying the DNA, it's the false positives.
Because it reacts to other things.
Oh, heavily.
Mm.
Luminol doesn't just react to blood. It reacts to copper, it reacts to bleach, it even reacts to the enzymes in horseradish.
Wait, really? Horseradish?
Yes.
So if a suspect aggressively scrubs a scene with household bleach, or even spilled the specific condiment, the entire kitchen is going to glow like a Christmas tree.
Yep. And then the investigators have to chemically differentiate between a brutal attack and someone just doing a deep cleaning.
That is insane.
Which is precisely why forensic science has to be so deliberate. You cannot rely on a single chemical reaction to tell the whole story.
Okay, so the scene is scanned, photographed, and chemically tested. Now we move into the physical collection, which honestly sounds like an incredibly high-stakes game of operation.
It is meticulous. This is where the yellow numbered tenths come in. The marker system.
Right, and there is a rigid hierarchy to those yellow markers. Think about that room you're sitting in again. If you had to tag everything, where do you even start?
Well, in a homicide, the victim's body is invariably tent number 1.
Always number 1. Then they spiral outward from there. Bullet holes might be number 2, a dropped weapon number 3.
And they photograph the item, place the tent, photograph it again, and they always place a physical scale next to the evidence.
Context and relative size are everything, right?
Exactly. I mean, a close-up photograph of a bullet casing without a millimeter scale doesn't tell a firearms expert in a lab whether they're looking at a .22 caliber shell or a 12-gauge shotgun shell.
That makes total sense. But the actual physical removal of the evidence is where the protocols become surprisingly low-tech.
Oh, absolutely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and this detail completely rewired my understanding of forensics. The paper over plastic rule.
Yes, this is crucial.
When packaging biological evidence, like a bloody shirt or a swab of saliva, they rely heavily on standard brown paper bags instead of airtight plastic bags.
Which goes against our instincts, right?
Totally. Our brains are conditioned to think we want an airtight seal to protect evidence from the outside world. But the source made a fascinating analogy about fresh bread.
It is a perfect comparison. Think about it. If you bake a fresh loaf of bread and immediately seal it in a plastic bag, the trapped moisture causes it to sweat.
And within days, it's just covered in mold.
Exactly. Biological evidence is very similar. If a first responder puts a damp, blood-soaked T-shirt into a sealed Ziploc bag, the trapped moisture creates a microscopic greenhouse.
So bacteria and mold rapidly breed.
Very rapidly.
And what does that mold actually do to the DNA? Does it just kind of cover it up so it's hard to read?
No, it obliterates it. The growing microorganisms release enzymes called nucleases, which literally act like chemical scissors. They sever the molecular backbone of the DNA strands.
So the evidence isn't just covered up, it is fundamentally dismantled at a molecular level.
Yes. By using a porous paper bag, the evidence can breathe and naturally dry out, halting that bacterial growth. This raises an important question about how a multi-million-dollar investigation can literally be thwarted by trapped moisture just because someone chose a plastic bag over a paper one.
That intersection of high-end science and rudimentary paper bags is just wild to me.
It's the reality of the job.
But they aren't just bagging objects, right? They're extracting data points from the architecture itself.
Yes, using specialized tools.
Like, if a firearm was discharged, they utilize trajectory lasers.
Yeah.
If there was a hole in the wall, they can thread a laser through it to project a line straight back to where the shooter was standing.
They do.
But I'm hung up on the physics of that.
Yeah.
Like, if a bullet passes through drywall, or worse, through a victim's ribcage, doesn't the density of the object alter the trajectory? How does a straight laser line account for deflection?
Well, it requires complex terminal ballistics. A laser is a straight line, sure, but a bullet is subjected to kinetic energy loss and yaw.
Yeah, like the wobble.
Exactly, the wobble of the bullet as it hits resistance. So investigators don't just shine a laser and call it a day.
Right, that would be too simple.
They have to measure the angle of impact, calculate the deflection based on the density of the drywall or bone, and use specialized software to establish a cone of probability.
Wow.
It allows them to reconstruct the height and physical stance of the shooter. Was the shooter kneeling? Were they 6 feet tall?
And they will literally take the house apart to get those answers.
Oh, without hesitation.
The source mentioned using scalpels to cut out sections of blood-stained carpet, or using heavy-duty power tools like sawzalls to carve a bullet out of the studs.
They have to control the environment to dissect it properly.
But when the deep dive takes us to an outdoor crime scene, the pristine vacuum of the indoor scene is violently ripped away.
It is a completely different ballgame.
Suddenly, investigators are fighting the very physics of nature.
An outdoor scene is a ticking clock against the planet itself. Rain washes away blood, ultraviolet radiation from the sun aggressively degrades DNA, and wind scatters trace evidence.
It's like the environment is an active accomplice trying to erase the crime.
Which forces investigators to rely on some incredible field engineering.
Yeah, imagine a suspect steps in deep mud and leaves a perfect boot print. You can photograph it, but you need the three-dimensional depth.
Right, but you can't just pour plaster into a puddle.
Exactly. So they use something called a shake and cast kit. The source described it, and it's fascinating.
Because pouring a heavy, wet liquid directly into a fragile mud footprint would completely wash away the microscopic ridges you're trying to capture.
So what's in the shake and cast system?
It utilizes calcium sulfate hemihydrate. It comes in a pouch with a built-in water plier. You break the bladder, mix it within the sealed bag to a clay-like consistency, and then carefully pour it.
And the reason it doesn't destroy the print is because of an exothermic chemical reaction, right?
Right, correct. As the compound mixes with water, it rapidly generates heat and begins to cure almost instantly upon contact.
Oh, wow.
The heat and the curing process allow the material to physically bond with the microscopic textures of the dirt without displacing them. 30 minutes later, you pull a rock-solid, perfect three-dimensional reverse cast out of the mud.
That is brilliant for surface evidence. But what if you were fighting the earth itself? Like, what if they suspect a murder weapon or a victim is buried in the woods? They can't just blind dig a 10-acre forest.
No, that's when they bring in ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. It operates by sending high-frequency electromagnetic pulses deep into the ground.
And it's not taking a photograph underground, it's measuring resistance.
Right. Exactly. It measures dielectric permittivity. When those electromagnetic pulses hit undisturbed soil, they travel at a consistent speed.
Right.
But if they hit a void, a buried metal box, or disturbed earth where a grave was dug and refilled, the signal bounces back at a different velocity. The GPR machine maps these anomalies.
And when they find an anomaly, the excavation process sounds agonizingly slow.
Oh, it is.
The source noted they might use heavy equipment, like a backhoe, to move the top layer of earth, but they stop a full foot above the suspected target.
They have to. From there, it is hands and knees.
They hand dig, sifting every single ounce of dirt through mesh screens to find a rogue button, a shell casing, or a tiny fragment of bone.
It requires immense patience.
But a buried or even surface-level body outdoors brings us to one of the most unsettling yet scientifically profound fields of forensics.
Entomology.
The bug whisperers.
The study of insects, yes. When a biological organism perishes outdoors, the local ecosystem responds immediately.
Like how fast?
Fast. Blowflies, in particular, possess specialized olfactory sensors that can detect the gases of decomposition from miles away, often arriving within minutes of death.
The veteran CSI in the source material had this incredibly jarring quote. They declared, "I love maggots. Maggots are the best. I'm telling you right now."
It's hilarious, but they mean it.
Which is a wild thing to say out loud.
Yeah.
But when you look at the biology, you realize it's bizarre, yet brilliant. The size and age of a maggot becomes a literal biological stopwatch for murder.
It is a morbid yet stunning paradox. Nature is actively consuming the crime scene, but in doing so, it provides the most mathematically accurate timestamp available to investigators.
Because forensic entomologists study the life cycle of these blowflies.
Right, but it isn't just about measuring the size of the insect, it is about thermal biology.
Because insects are cold-blooded, so their growth rate is entirely dependent on the ambient temperature.
Yes, the concept is called accumulated degree hours. A maggot will develop exponentially faster in 90-degree summer heat than it will in 50-degree autumn weather.
Okay, that makes sense.
So by taking the climate data from the days preceding the discovery and measuring the exact life stage of the maggots collected from the body, an entomologist can mathematically calculate the precise window of time the body was exposed to that environment.
Nature provides the timestamp.
Exactly.
So investigators have the LiDAR point clouds, the paper bags full of dried swabs, the complex laser trajectories, the exothermic casts of footprints and, vials of maggots.
The mountain of isolated data.
Right. But data alone isn't a narrative. The final phase is synthesis. They have to string these isolated physics and biology facts into a cohesive story of what actually happened in that space.
The synthesis phase demands looking at the physical evidence to establish the sequence of events. They usually do a final walkthrough, starting at the point of entry.
Like a broken window.
Yes. And if a window is broken, they don't just look at where the glass landed on the floor to see if it was broken from the outside or inside.
Right, because someone could just break it from the inside and sweep the glass out to stage a break-in.
Exactly. So they look at the stress lines on the glass itself. They analyze the conchoidal fractures.
Conchoidal fractures?
Yeah, when a projectile hits glass, it creates radial cracks that spread outward and concentric cracks that circle the impact. By examining the microscopic ridges on the edge of the broken shards, a forensic scientist can definitively prove which side of the glass received the initial force.
Thus absolutely proving whether a break-in was genuine or staged from the inside.
Exactly.
And they apply that same physics to blood. They don't just swab it for DNA. They analyze the spatter patterns.
Right, the velocity of the droplets, the cast-off pattern on the ceiling from a swinging weapon, all of it maps the physical choreography of the attack.
Is the victim standing or kneeling? Did the attacker swing left-handed or right-handed?
And while they are mapping the physical choreography, they are also looking for the invisible clues, deciphering the psychological footprint of the room. Is it a disorganized scene where valuables were left behind, suggesting a crime of passion or blinding rage?
Or is it surgically clean, with specific items removed, indicating a calculated, premeditated act?
Right. They weigh the physical biology against the psychological context, combining statements, autopsy results, and scene evidence to form a working hypothesis.
But so, what does this all mean? Here is the most humbling realization for a modern investigator. And it circles back to why they preserve everything so meticulously. They know, as they're standing in that room, that they might not solve the case today.
No, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the definition of a great investigator is not just someone who closes a case before their shift ends. They operate as custodians of truth for the future.
Because forensic technology is advancing at a breathtaking exponential rate.
They are carefully swabbing microscopic trace evidence, drying it perfectly in a paper bag, keeping it safe for decades.
Knowing full well that current science might not even have the vocabulary to understand it today. They're essentially packing a time capsule for a scientist who might not even be born yet.
Exactly. They are preserving a genetic ghost so that in 2036 or 2046, a newly invented machine can finally read the story they saved.
That is the ultimate burden and privilege of the job, right? Freezing time so that the truth can survive long enough to eventually be discovered.
It really is.
It fundamentally changes how you view the space. A crime scene isn't a playground for quick assumptions or grandstanding TV detective work. It is a sacred, highly technical space of extreme patience, exothermic chemistry, complex geometry, paper bags, lasers, and, yes, maggots.
And it leaves you with a staggering thought to consider as you go about your day.
What's that?
Think about the vast, climate-controlled archives of unsolved case files sitting in police basements around the globe right now. With technological capabilities doubling every few years, how many locked cardboard boxes currently hold a perfectly preserved, properly bagged piece of evidence?
Just waiting for the exact scientific breakthrough needed to finally speak.
There are ghosts just waiting for a microphone. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you. Look a little closer at the science of the everyday. And the next time you see someone on TV walk into a crime scene with a cup of coffee, you have my full permission to yell at the screen. We'll catch you next time.